Hi, welcome to Law and Disorder. My name's Joe. A little bit about me. I work in law enforcement. I have 6 years experience in the forensic. I'm on the board of directors for Families Against Narcotics. I do a lot in the community for recovery. This is Tim. I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hey, I guess my credentials for this podcast are the fact that I'm a recovering addict. Heroin would have been my drug of choice, but I used crack, I drank alcohol, I smoked marijuana. I did most things that drug addicts do. We were hoping that we can provide different perspectives through doing this, not just necessarily the addict's perspective and the law enforcement perspective, but hopefully many more viewpoints along the way. We have all kinds of guests we're starting to line up. Besides working with the local fan chapter, we're going to be talking in schools. So we'll just see where it goes. It's if nothing else, fun for me, and I hope that it comes across whoever's watching or listening. And if we can help people along the way or just facilitate discussion, then that's a bonus. So see where we're at. This is first time we're going live on Facebook. All this is new to us. I've never had a podcast before. Have you had?
No, I sure haven't. It's the first
podcast.
Time around.
Yeah. So I never, not an expert on paper airplanes or origami or anything like that. I'm just an expert on addiction and now thankfully recovery. So I think I have a lot to offer on those topics. And we'll see. I hope so.
Kind of what we're going to do is we're going to show different perspectives of the whole process from addiction to recovery, how important it is to have other people involved in that process, whether it be the drug courts, whether it be organizations such as Families Against Narcotics, just kind of opening up the door to all the resources that are available. And Tim especially can talk about what really excelled him to get to where he's at right now. Some of the things we like to discuss is kind of, we'll start with how we met. Our first podcast was an interesting day. We set a time for 6 o'clock, and I said, hey, I'll pick you up downtown. And then I get a text message, hey, it's going to be a little later because what happened to him?
I had to I had to drop. Drop means around here at least urinate into a cup in front of another man. That's something I've done up to 4 times a week for the last 6 months because I've progressed through this drug court program that we'll talk more about. I only have to pee in front of a man twice a week now. You never know which day it's going to be. You just kind of find out morning of. Locally, you only have 2 windows to do it, either in the morning between 6 a.m. and 8:30 p.m. or in the evening between 6 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. If I said that right. So you got to fit it in. You got to do it, lest you be sitting in jail for a weekend and explaining Monday morning why you didn't hit that test that you were court ordered to do. I haven't missed one yet. I don't intend to miss one, but it's a good example of how kind of the pros and cons of availability. They're more good than harm, but it is definitely invasive. It would have been nice to not have to send that text. Pee in a cup and put off another project, but that's the way it is. And part of recovery is just like acceptance,
Yeah, it didn't bother me. Actually, it actually helped me out because I was running a little late. But yeah, it's a fact of life. Something he has to do, and I understand that. It keeps him in check and on the right path.
There's a lot that is expected of someone in drug court. And drug court is meant to be an alternative to incarceration. It's meant to help people recover. There's a lot of grants locally, and really I think all over the country you're seeing drug courts pop up. But once you're in it, initially at least, you go in front of the judge every single week. Every single week I'm something of a defendant. I'll speak for myself, ordered to go to 3 12-step meetings a week, which I've come to enjoy. but it took getting used to. I go to therapy every week. That's court ordered. I dropped like we just discussed, and you add that to a full-time job, and my job is a parent, and it keeps you pretty busy. I think it's designed to, ideally. It certainly does accomplish that. But I'm grateful for it. I'm super grateful for it. Sometimes I rant and rave about having to do some of these things, but I know that I need it. It's kind of embarrassing, frankly, to say.
But on the flip side, you just kind of mentioned the fact that it keeps you busy. I think we can all say that downtime is probably one of the worst enemies of someone in recovery.
Yeah, for sure. What's the expression? Idle hands.
Mm-hmm.
The devil does something with idle hands.
Right.
I think he smokes crack with idle hands. That's at least what happened in my life.
That could be.
Yeah.
But at any rate, there's accountability there. There's a push to do the right thing. And obviously, with that comes along the urinating in front of a man in a cup.
Which, you know what? I don't really, like, I say that as kind of a joke, right? But I wanted, it was only because it's a weird thing to talk about. It's kind of an uncomfortable thing to admit or discuss. But when it gets down to it, I really don't mind it anymore. And you see these people so routinely that it's not a big deal. And you just kind of, you get to know them like anybody else in your community. Right, it's a weird thing.
At the same time, is it not satisfying to walk in there and know you don't have any worries?
Oh, it's such a relief.
I mean,
such a relief.
You're not trying to an hour before trying to scramble to find someone else's urine.
No,
I mean, that's not, you know.
There are, in the past, I would have jobs send me for tests, and I'd sweat it out, hoping, right, you know, that I pass the test and get the job. And then, you know, I see people occasionally in these courts in probation, just on regular probation, because I work in the mental health field, and I see them try to beat tests. Mm-hmm. And it just reminds me of all the stress that was in my life because I couldn't stay clean. And that sort of...
yeah, it's kind of what we talked about in one of the podcasts that we recently did. That stress of, if you have a warrant, you're dodging people you owe money to that you stole from, and that whole process of addiction. It's got to be like a total relief to walk in and be like, yep, it's my turn, here you go. It's almost a prouder moment for you to do that than it is the man holding the cup. Right?
Yeah, oh, for sure. And you know, what's interesting about this drug addiction and recovery world is it's a whole world. So like, you can't go a minute without saying something that strikes up a story in my mind. And you talked about owing people money and dodging them. And, you know, I could get into whole stories about dealers who would offer me a line of credit because they want you to keep coming to them. And that's great until you want to go to somebody else.
Right.
And you best not get caught going to somebody else when you owe dealer number one some money. And so that does kind of unfold and just create all these little webs and relationships along the way that you get really addicted to the lifestyle too. Even though it's like sometimes a horrible, scummy, difficult lifestyle, it's like, oh, you know, it was my world. So
it's almost like a challenge to maneuver all those.
It is.
Yeah, you know, like,
because you get, you know, people get addicted to the act of snorting drugs or the act of shooting up drugs. You get addicted to the chase. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a certain thrill when you're ripping off a department store knowing that you're going to get high because of it. And so when you get clean, you don't just miss the high, but you miss everything that went with it, even though sometimes it sucked.
So I contacted you earlier today about getting into one of the local schools to speak. And we've talked about this many times, that education is the key to this whole process. If we can get to them when they're younger, get in the schools, relate to them. Now, you know, obviously we've discussed, we're not going to go in with a PowerPoint presentation and be like, womp, 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 womp,
right.
womp,
pie
womp,
charts
womp, womp,
and bar graphs.
Yeah, we're not going to do all that.
Not a lecture.
We get in, we're going to relate to them. Kind of let them know, hey, this is what can happen. And obviously Tim can relay his whole story, which will be impactful in their eyes as we relate to them. We come down to their level. I don't go in uniform and like, don't do drugs. They've heard that their entire lives from teachers, parents, police, everybody, commercials. We want to get in on a different angle. And it's going to be Tim's first time, and I'm really looking forward. Tim, obviously, he's a good speaker, a very personable kind of guy. So it's going to be real interesting to see how they take to his story.
Yeah, I'm super excited. It's a high school in Flint, I think.
Correct.
The first one we're
Yep.
doing, and I guess we don't have to name drop it, but that's where I did most of my dirt. You know, that's where the majority of my drug addict career unfolded, was in Flint. And the other thing is, my addiction first began to blossom when I was that age. I was 14 years old when I first hit a joint, when I first had a drink, and I took to those things like a fish takes to water. Like, in no time, I had a problem. I was stealing from my family before I was 15 years old. And it wasn't even for heroin. It was just for weed. Later in life, as you know, I got addicted to harder drugs. The compromises I was willing to make to my integrity, the hurt I was willing to impose on my loved ones, just evolved and got more and more serious. So I'm excited to talk to the kids in high school. I'm excited to hear from them too, because times change, you know.
Oh yeah, with this the peer pressure through the social media.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to hear their perspective of things. Back in the day, peer pressure was a lot easier to handle when we were growing up. I couldn't imagine now. I mean, it's 100-fold of what we had to deal with. But yeah, it's a crazy world, small world. You mentioned Flint, and I kind of chuckled because we were talking the other day. I have a store in one of the malls in Flint, and I was telling him how I always go into Starbucks, which is in a Barnes and Noble. And the funny thing is he had a story related to Barnes and Noble. I'll let you go ahead and tell it. It was kind of a funny story.
I used to meet dealers at the Genesee Valley Mall on a regular basis. I spent a lot of time with my parents. Have had a home in Swartz Creek for 10 years, and I have a 12-year-old son, which is another reason I'm excited to go into the high schools and talk to kids. But there were times in my life where I would have my parents drop me off at the mall, and this was part of trying to help me clean. Like, I would willingly turn over the car keys because I knew I couldn't handle the freedom. So my parents went to great lengths to try to help me from every angle. But I was manipulating that situation like I would any other. They would drop me off at the mall. I would meet a dealer. That was usually stressful. You
Right.
said we were going to pick you up at 7. Why do you want it to be 7:45 now?
Right.
But I would go into the bathroom, pull out the little baby changing table, and use it to get high. I would snort heroin right off of it. Then I'd go sit in one of their comfortable chairs and do the whole nodding out until I got picked up. And even when I wasn't getting dropped off at the mall, when I would go get high somewhere in Flint, I've just always loved the bookstore, right? So I worked in Borders back in the day. And so it was just like without even thinking about it, a place I would go. And so many times I probably near death in one of those chairs, either in the cafe or wherever else in the store.
So it's safe to say you weren't speed reading.
It's safe to say I wasn't reading shit.
Right.
And I probably had a stack of books and magazines in my lap that just slid out of it.
So it's funny now. In fact, yesterday, as a matter of fact, I went into that very same store, got my Starbucks, and I just had to look around. I took a look around, and I'm like, wow, any one of these could be Tim.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it is, right in front of us. It's everywhere. So the importance of getting into schools to get these kids some education. Sometimes I've had it where they come up afterwards, many times actually, and they want resources, they want help. They haven't been able to open up to people. They watch family members suffer.
Yeah.
And it's terrible. It's terrible.
One of the best things that comes out of me opening up like this is I get these private messages from people every so often who will begin to confide in me about their problem. And it'll be a couple of times like the first time they ever confided in anybody. And I think that was just, in those cases, a good first step for them. I wasn't someone in their immediate world or periphery, so I couldn't do a whole lot besides listen. But I think it hopefully gave them the courage to then go talk to somebody who could better help them.
And if anything, it's a stepping stone.
For sure.
They'll slowly gain the kind of, just like recovery.
Yeah.
You know, when you first are in recovery, you know, that you inch into being open about it.
It's flattering too.
Right.
Frankly, you know, it means a lot to me when someone opens up like that, because I've been there, so I know it's not easy. And you know, it's something that just truly it does mean a lot to me when it happens. And I guess I'll put that out there. If anybody ever needs to talk, like I'm always available as best I can be. If I don't get back to you immediately, I get back to you as soon as I can. You talked about kids coming up to you asking for resources. That's another one of my favorite things about this, is the longer I work in the field that I do, the better able I'm to connect people to resources. And also just through like 12-step meetings, you know, sometimes you meet a kid with a certain problem, and for whatever reason, it'll remind me of somebody in the program who I think is a good fit to mentor them. Or even when it's an adult, somebody who's a good fit, just to connect with them and relate to them. It's you know, the reason 12-step groups work, in my opinion, isn't the steps as much as it is the community. Because I can't find, very easily at least, another community where I can open up and talk about stealing money from my grandmother for crack, right? Most people gasp, at least internally, if they don't want to show it, when they hear something like that. So being able to go into a NA meeting or an AA meeting and express those sorts of things, especially early in recovery, is very important. So connecting people with other people who get it is just a big part of this.
Right. And that also gives you the confidence to rebuild relationships. You know, you burn a lot of bridges in that whole path. And just to get that confidence going up is going to make a difference in the way you progress.
Yeah.
So that self-confidence is a big one. I talk a lot. We do a Vivitrol orientation once a week, and that's a big thing. Is the pride factor. Do you truly want recovery? Because if you don't, you know, like Vivitrol wouldn't be for you.
Yeah.
In fact, if you don't truly want recovery, Vivitrol could be basically the death of
The
you.
last thing you want.
Yeah, because
you know, they say too in the 12-step, the recovery community, if you want recovery, you have to work at least as hard to pursue it as you did to pursue your addiction. And that can be daunting to hear the first time, like, because you're like, man, I worked really hard to be an addict.
You read books.
Yeah, for sure. You read things online. It's amazing how it's like a craft, man. It's amazing how well addicts understand a certain like slice of life.
Right. And I always say, I'm not going to work is harder than you are.
Yeah.
You know, when
makes
someone
sense.
comes to me for help, I can't work harder than they are.
You can't.
It's not possible.
If that worked, there would be loved ones all over the country who would have solved the addiction problems of whoever.
It wouldn't be an issue.
No. Yeah, if you could do it for other people, we would do it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You know, I also, as much as like I'm excited to just share my story and open up, and like I'm a totally open book, and anybody can pop up like any question at any time and I'll answer it. Like I won't hesitate to answer anything if I think it's respectful. And I really look forward to hearing different points of view like yours, because I never would have imagined sitting down with somebody in law enforcement. And we have guests line up. We're going to have a judge speak to us. We're going to have a therapist speak to us. We're going to have other addicts, and to hear all these different perspectives, I think will be really cool, because part of what is at the core of the disease of addiction, if you will, is just being completely self-centered. And that's one thing you have to learn not to be if you want to get better, is so selfish, so self-centered.
Right. Yeah, and it's very important to see every aspect. I think one of the most important ones is going to come from the family members.
Yeah.
Because you know what you did.
Yeah.
You know where you manipulated, where you lied, where you stole.
Yeah.
They aren't always up on what's what. Because as a parent, you want to believe the best in your kid. As a spouse, you want to believe the best in your husband or wife. And you don't want to see those things. And a lot of times they go through denial, so they miss a lot of things even after the fact. But to hear, like, I'm really curious to hear from your brother.
I can't wait. I think my older brother's going to be such a good guest that besides him and a certain therapist, I think of him as the most likely recurring guest, where every few months or so, because his name is Andy. He's in Detroit. He actually helps addicts in his free time, helps homeless people in Detroit, just because it's just something he feels passionate about doing. But because of that, he's pretty sharp when it comes to all this for somebody who didn't slip into addiction themselves. And he watched me go through it for years and years. So it'll be, I think it'll be valuable to hear his insight. But yeah, family members, I mean, we met in families against narcotics, which I'm an anomaly on at least the local chapter as far as being someone in recovery, right? No one else on the board in a leadership position is actually in recovery. So
you're the first one.
Right. So where we met, we come from a place where it's driven by people who've been impacted by addiction, not through their personal struggle with it, but someone.
Yeah, someone directly. Yeah, and we're going to bring in the perspective. The big question is like law enforcement. We get parents show up to like Families Against Narcotics meeting, for example, and they're like, well, first thing is they want to blame law enforcement for little Johnny ended up in jail for X amount of warrants for shoplifting, and then they walk in the lobby and they're like, they come to me and they say, what is my son here for? And when ultimately it's for addiction related causes, their jaws drop to the floor. They are like, what in the hell just happened? I mean, they disbelief. So the interesting part on law enforcement is once they get to know us, anyway, our department, we are a little more progressive in that area. And you're seeing a lot more departments come along that same road. You're not going to win the battle by just arresting people, locking them up. Okay, that's not going to happen. Because what happens is they get out, they go right out the back door, and they jump right back in homeboy's car or wherever. And then next thing you know, sometimes they don't even make it down the end of the corner, and they're already drunk, high,
and
or
it's
whatever.
Very easy to get so trapped up in the system that it's one more stress factor that makes you feel hopeless and will cause some people to say, what's the point? Why even try?
Right, and those are those stressors involved. Once you're locked up, you lose everything pretty much. You're going to lose your housing. You're going to lose your job if you had one.
Right.
Vehicle is probably impounded and fees through the roof.
Right.
So to get all that back, those are stressors. Those are huge stressors. And some people, if they don't have that outside support from positive influences, it's really easy to say, you know what, screw it. Because I'm not getting anywhere right now.
Another thing you hear in the recovery community is fuck it.
Right.
People get a case of the fuck it's, and it's easy to be in recovery and say that. And one thing that I don't think is easy for the non-addict to relate to is the idea that all it takes is one. There's another expression, and I look forward to sharing these. You get kind of an inside look at AA, NA, shit like that. One is too many, 1,000 is never enough. So when we take that first one, when we say F it and pick that first one up, it's over. Like, we don't have the luxury to say that to ourselves ever.
That's where that pride comes in too. I see that a lot. You'll see inmates that get released, and those stressors are all there. But it's something as simple as getting a ride to get their Vivitrol injection. If they don't have a ride, they're instead of picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, yo, I need a ride," to someone responsible, in our situation, in our community, you can actually call community mental health or the clinic, and they will get you a ride.
They will. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they will.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Make arrangements.
So the system itself is not failing them. They're failing themselves by, and some of them use it as an excuse.
I'm certain this system is progressing. I believe that. I believe law enforcement, the criminal justice system, society. I think it's been such an epidemic that we've had no choice but to change the way we're approaching and viewing this.
Right. And the evidence is that we're sitting here right now. I mean, this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
5 years ago, unheard of. But I would like to touch on something we discussed in one of our podcasts, and that was you have a lot of negative people, in negative attitudes towards recovery, addiction. Sometimes you hear, well, they made that choice, so suffer the consequences.
Right.
They'll see a post about Narcan. They brought somebody back who had overdosed. And for those of you that don't know what Narcan is, it's pretty much a nasal spray type thing that will
Can immediately reverse.
reverse the effects of opioids.
Although the ones on the street right now are so strong.
You need 4 and 5 kits,
Yeah.
and that's due to fentanyl and carfentanil.
Yeah.
But that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
But what you have is you have
So
those
much
people,
to talk about.
right? Yeah, but we can go on and on. But the negativity, those people that are just spraying that negativity, screw them, let them die, this and that. Well, you always see that, and then you wonder, are they just ultimately really, really pissed off at someone who's going through addiction, or do they truly have like no clue what's going on?
I usually assume they've been hurt by somebody that went through addiction. They have a resentment toward a parent or a child. And there's also coupled that with maybe some ignorance on the topic.
But this day and age, with it being an issue with the federal government, I mean, it's going to be a huge topic in come election year.
Yeah.
So I find it very hard to believe that someone is that ignorant to the epidemic.
I would say they're not ignorant to the epidemic, but they're ignorant to the causes of it, the importance of treatment, like just how to look at treatment and recovery. A lot of people get hardened. I mean, we all get hardened toward different things and people in life.
Mm-hmm.
But the stigma around addicts and alcoholics, I do believe, is lifting a bit. When I first started going to 12-step meetings in 2011, I think there was truly still a strong element of anonymity. I think nowadays it's still there, but we're seeing more people like me who are willing to just kind of share their story.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I do that, I like to put that out there, is I feel that if I share what I went through, then those experiences have value. They could help somebody else. It might just help me by opening up.
But that's the saying, you help one person.
For sure.
You've done it.
I mean, we're talking about like human life, right? People are
Right.
dying. And it's kind of cliche to be like, if I can just save one child, but legitimately, if I can do that,
That's what it is.
that'd be amazing, right?
Yeah.
And it's crazy the death that's taking place in every community. I worked with, not for very long, but a mother and daughter who about a year and a half ago, I had only known them like a week, but I knew them. A year and a half ago, they both overdosed on the same drug in the same house in the same night.
Yep, I remember that.
That's so like,
Yeah, that was mind blowing.
yeah.
But it happens.
And it doesn't matter if you're an addict or a law enforcement officer. When you hear things like that, it's just like, whoa.
Whoa. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, because I mean, what are the chances? And people will say, well, it's not in this community or that community. Those people they really have the blinders
Oh
on.
yeah.
Yeah, they're just completely oblivious to what's going on
Yeah.
around them. And to be honest with you, we'll take it like this: if their community is a Barnes and Noble, and take me for instance, I go in to get my coffee, I would have never suspected that someone like you would be sitting there waiting to meet their dealer.
Yeah.
So yeah, it
and
happens.
we get to be so fluid, man. It happens under people's noses. It's
Right.
just like we're so good at it, and
Well,
it's not
sometimes
something
the
to brag
obvious is
about.
not so obvious.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just hidden in plain sight.
Right.
What, like, when you're talking to another deputy and you hear something about that,
Mm-hmm.
like, what's the attitude coming from your world about just an increase in overdoses? What are you guys saying? Because we're saying, I hope I don't die.
Well,
I might,
shit.
but I probably won't.
Right. But you know, when you work in on our side of it, you see people come in and they stay, say, 3 months in jail, 6 months, whatever.
Yeah.
And before we've progressed into, we'll touch on that later, but we've progressed quite a bit. But prior to that, they would come in 3-6 months. I'm just dead set on they're not going back to that lifestyle. I'm never using it again, not going to happen. Right. And they promise themselves they'd make it known to every person, deputy, whatever, counselors, they would harp on that. There's no way I'm going back.
Right.
And so many of them will get out that back door, and a day or two later.
So quickly.
Yeah.
How fast we can lose our resolve as addicts is amazing.
Yep. And we've had them where they've overdosed and died a day or two after being released.
Yeah.
And what it is they think they can go back to that same dose.
Tolerance drops.
Yep.
The appetite doesn't change.
Yep. And that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, with that being said, everything's kind of progressed now. But if you take the mentality of law enforcement, now we understand we cannot just arrest our way out of this.
But are you guys like, they bring it on themselves? That same heart and attitude that we talked about being out in society, do you see that in the department where they're kind of like, these people are doing it to themselves, I don't have an abundance of sympathy? Or are you seeing that hopefully change a little bit?
You're seeing a big change. The older mentality, when in the 70s when heroin was big,
So I hear.
Yeah. So hey, was that?
Were you there?
Was that an old person? Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
Was that an old person?
No, of course not.
All right, then I won't rip on your Lion shirt.
That. Yeah,
but,
I was gonna get there. When we
tells,
talked about resentments and how they factor
into. Yeah, well, that tells me
lines.
Anybody can have hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, there's always going to be a mixed opinion on that.
Of course.
Law enforcement, we're for the most part alpha personalities. We have to have that hardened shell. But that's kind of it's changing. It is.
Yeah. The guy who, the last time I went to jail, and that's a story like for a violation of my drug court terms, and it has to do with kratom, which I look forward to talking about on a podcast. Because if you haven't heard of kratom, you probably will. It's a problem already, and it's going to become a bigger one. At any rate, I got thrown in jail. And the officer, the deputy who took me into custody and put me on the van and all that, man, he's a big, scary-looking dude. Like, scary, right?
Was this our county?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I was curious to see because I had seen him like every week for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you when you see people frequently, but you don't have a chance to really interact with them, you can't help but wonder what that human being is like. And so he was the nicest guy. Mm-hmm. It caught me off guard. I was like, man, when this guy frisked me, it's gonna suck, right? Like, not the case at all. He was super cool. He was really friendly, and not just with me, but the other, like,
everybody.
The 10 guys wearing orange. It was, and I appreciated that because I know there's a certain amount of that hard exterior you have to have in law enforcement. You have to see humanity shine through. When you're in a pair of handcuffs and somebody has power over you, it's humbling. It can be scary. You appreciate when that person is showing you some respect. You don't take that for granted. Right. I don't, at least.
Right, and it's how each of them handle that power. It's not really a power. It's just, if you think about the big picture, it's just the whole concept is you can't survive on your own out there, so we're going to make sure you survive on your own in here. That's, I guess, where that word corrections comes from.
Yeah, right.
You know, I used to ask, a long time ago, I used to ask, what are we actually correcting? Because at the time, you know, we were kind of stagnant as far as the classes and the progression with the times. And now, you know, you'll see inmates actually take pride in going to as many classes as they can. They're opening up. They're talking about things that before would have been unheard of.
Anybody, this is not meant to be a pat on my own back. When I say this for anyone else in recovery, like, you should take pride in doing those things if you are, because it's not easy to do. Every time you choose to go to a meeting instead of a trap house, that's a victory. That's something that what the average person who hasn't dealt personally with these demons doesn't understand is I didn't just make a decision that I'm going to get clean and I'm going to stay clean. I've had to make that like 5,000 times in the last 7 months. Maybe not that many, but like the urge, especially early on, keeps coming up. You have to say, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to give into it. And the only way you're really going to have the resolve and the strength to say no to yourself is by going to meetings and going to therapy and doing these things that aren't necessarily easy for someone to accept that they need in their life. The first step in 12 steps or 12-step groups is, you know, I came to believe I'm powerless over my addiction. And people want to get into semantics sometimes with that. But yeah, man, like, I know I'm an addict. There's no doubt about it. I can't control my use of mind-altering chemicals. And at this point in my life, I need help. Less help than I needed last month, less help than I needed 6 months ago, but I still need help. And I'll probably always need help, at least a little bit.
Right. And that we've hit on it so many times is that pride. That pride will automatically enable you to make the proper decision. You hear people say all the time, oh, that's a tough decision. Well, no, actually it's not. It really isn't. Are we going to make a wrong decision? Absolutely. That's acceptable if, I mean, we'll use an example. If I'm an alcoholic and walk into a party and they're drinking, okay, if I can't assess that situation and say that's probably not going to turn out in my favor, we have a problem.
Yeah.
You have to have that pride. Like, I can go to a party and everybody knows I like my coffee, right?
As do I.
Yeah.
And the addict in me. You saw me just crush one
yeah,
of those.
he's already done with his.
Yeah.
But I could go to a party where they're all drinking, I have my coffee, and yeah, they'll bust my balls. But guess what? This is the decision I made for me, not for them. There's nobody going to pressure me into having a drink, okay, because I have my priorities in life. I'm not going to have to go home and explain to my wife, hey, I lost my license for being, you know, impacted by what they wanted me to do. I mean, how silly is that, right?
Right.
So the decision-making process becomes very easy, well, I should say easier, as that pride level rises.
Yeah, most of us are so broken in the beginning that we don't have any sense of pride and hope. Hope is probably the most difficult thing to reintroduce into some addicts' lives, to have that belief that, you know what, maybe happiness is out there for me. Maybe a drug-free life is available to me.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to learn to make those decisions, not put yourself in situations that are too big for you at first. You know, like, if I was going to go to, say, a holiday party right now and I knew there would be some kind of element of drugs and alcohol, I would probably want to take like a chaperone, so to speak, with me.
Someone to kind of have your back.
Yeah, if it was like a family thing, like my brother would be a good example of someone who would not let me sneak off and do something I shouldn't do.
Right.
But it would be best to find a reason not to go. And just knowing what your limitations are being honest with yourself. Honesty, they say, is the antidote to our disease. And I believe there's a lot of truth in that.
100%.
And this is about me coming on here and getting honest. There are questions I could be asked that would be hard for me to field. There are skeletons in my closet for sure, but hopefully I would still be able to handle those questions in a truthful way where I'm not being dishonest. If I'm not comfortable answering something, hopefully I can say that and just admit it. But I'll tell you what, there's not that much that I won't talk about. I want to take these experiences, be honest with them, and share them, and hopefully help somebody else.
Right, and that's why we're doing this. We're doing this to not only show that there's always hope. You can never give up hope, no matter how many times. I mean, we see it all the time. Someone goes to rehab, they're there
for the 7th time.
Right, and in the 7th time, they're there 2 days and take off. Right, so you can't give up hope. It's the approach. You have to be supportive, but you have to kind of know your role in this whole thing.
Yeah.
As a parent, it's got to be. It has to be devastating, because you know you want the best for your kid. You want to step in and help them, but at the end of the day, they can only help themselves. You can't make somebody go to rehab. You can't make somebody go get a Vivitrol injection. You can't do it.
And let me put a plug in for Vivitrol real quick. It works great. I'd take it. If you've ever considered it, do it. You won't have any regrets. It's helped me so much deal with my cravings, and it's been one of those things like meetings and therapy and going in front of the judge that has contributed to my success. And the point I'm at in my life versus where I was a year ago, it's incredible, the difference. And not just my circumstances, but myself. So Vivitrol is just one of those things I wanted to kind of give a shout for.
And I'm kind of a strong believer. I have this discussion all the time with inmates. Okay, they're like, why should I do Vivitrol? I can get on Suboxone, methadone, and that helps me keep going, right? Be it as it may, it's still an excuse, in my opinion. From the perspective of someone being locked up for, we're talking 6 months to a year, no drugs.
And hang in there, because this will be our first semi-disagreement between the addict and the law enforcement. But go ahead.
Right. Okay, we'll get to that. But you're in a secured facility. You cannot take drugs.
Right.
Okay, you don't have access to them. So after 3 to 6 months, your brain starts to rewire.
This part I agree with.
Okay, so now you have a clear head. You can start rebuilding relationships for $15 a minute.
Right?
It's what
you can't put a price on that.
No.
I mean, you did.
Well, I did, but yeah, you're going through all those. You're like, oh shit, I messed up. I burnt this person.
Yeah.
I stole from this person, and it gives you time to kind of realign your priorities in life.
And get honest.
Yeah, and get honest. That is for sure. But you can't do that if you're substituting Suboxone for heroin or methadone for heroin. When you have the opportunity to get on something that's non-addictive, right? Non-addictive.
Yes.
Takes those cravings away.
Correct.
There is no street value for Vivitrol.
None whatsoever.
You couldn't sell it on the street, even though one injection of Vivitrol
28 days.
Yeah, but it's about $1,200.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know how much heroin that is.
Right.
Right. You know how much Suboxone, right.
Right.
But just for an example, but you could not sell that on the street.
You could not.
No. And there's reasons for it.
Because it's not a narcotic.
Right.
Well, Suboxone is.
I'm a true believer. If a drug has a street value, it's probably not good for you.
From a harm reduction standpoint, I still think there's a place for maybe not methadone as much as Suboxone.
In a facility?
No.
Okay, that's where I'm coming from.
So from somebody who is locked up for 90 days, 180 days, no, don't get on Suboxone.
Okay,
and I was
agree.
on Suboxone for 2 years, and it led to the situation I'm in right now is trying to get off of Suboxone led to a relapse because I had never weaned off of Suboxone after being on it for a long time. I didn't know heroin withdrawal is a sprint. Suboxone withdrawal is a marathon. I was unprepared for the marathon, so it led me to relapse, and that's a whole story we'll get into. So yeah, I think we agree more than maybe I let on, because yeah, if you're locked up and you have a chance to get clean and your brain starts to rewire, no, you shouldn't get on Suboxone the first day out.
You've ridded your body of
You've already done the hard part.
Yeah, the substance abuse
Yeah.
is no longer there.
Right.
The actual physical part of it.
Right.
You're always going to deal with that mental part of it.
Right.
But yeah, at that point, to me, when someone says that, they are not ready.
Oh, I agree. And now, when you talked about me being able to have the satisfaction of going in to take a drug test and no, I'm good, and it is satisfying, frankly. The little victories in life are what have kept me going for the last year.
So in reality, other than having to get there and back, and the pain in the butt it would be time-wise, you should be proud to piss in the cup every day.
Sure, and there's some of that there, but in the past, and I'm ready now, and I know that, and I'm finally convincing people in my life of that. I believe it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight, but in the past, I would have been thinking all kinds of ways around the test. And in jail, when you were pitching Vivitrol to me, I would have been thinking up all kinds of reasons why that wasn't the choice I should make.
But
right?
I can guarantee you, I would have called you out on every excuse.
I'm sure you would have.
Yeah.
I have no doubt. And I'm sure you do that, and you should challenge those guys in that situation, because I do think it is bullshit, right? Because I've been there.
And the easiest way to decipher who's there for a reason is simply ask the question, who did something stupid to end up here in jail?
Right.
And there's always one or two that won't raise their hand. So that tells me, yep, they're the victims. They're not being honest with themselves. I kick them right out.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, I'll go talk to them and explain to them, hey, you're obviously not ready. And it all reverts back to the pride. And
I respect people who can say, I'm not ready.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
I'm sad for them.
Yeah.
But let's not waste our time here. Yours or mine.
It's like we said,
Man,
I can't make somebody do something they don't want to.
Nope.
You can't make somebody do something.
Nope.
And it's just amazing how, and I can't stress it enough. And my big eye opener for that whole pride issue was we were actually at the school speaking. And I had
excited for that.
Yeah, I had someone in recovery with me, and she was in an accident. Okay, she was in an accident, and I thought that would be very instrumental in showing the kids what could happen, right? Because she was high as a kite when this accident happened.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she had a child with her.
Yeah.
So it wasn't pretty.
I've done it.
Yeah.
No judgment. Driven high with my child in my car. More than once.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think that, just that alone is an eye-opener.
Yeah.
Right? But so I asked her, I said, do you have any pictures of that? Because it'd be cool to get them up on the screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm not a big fan of PowerPoint and all that, but I thought that picture would do wonders. And she's like, well, yeah, my Facebook page. So I hand her an extra phone I had. And I said, well, go ahead and log on, email it to the teacher, and she can put it up on the screen. So she did, and then she handed me my phone back. And I asked her, I said, did you log out Facebook? Because I don't want that on my phone. And she's like, oh, yep, I sure did. While driving home from after we were speaking, that phone's just going nuts. And I'm like, I never get that many messages. What's going on? Right? So I drop her off, and eventually I get to looking at it. Yeah, she didn't log out. And the shit that I seen on there was mind-blowing. Okay, mind blowing.
Does she know you saw it?
No.
She does now.
She does now. But I'll tell you, that was a whole confidence pride issue. She had these people from the past, right, telling her things that were just, it blew my mind. And she was buying into all of this. And it just blew my mind.
Another recovery axiom, I'll have to look that word up later, I think I'm using it properly, would be the only thing you have to change is everything. So all those old connections in your life,
yep,
gotta go. And sometimes that means family, at least temporarily.
Right. You have to eliminate all, I always say you have to eliminate all negativity, and that negativity is defined by anything in your past. It's as simple as that. And if you don't want to do it, that means you're looking for an excuse when those daily stressors kick in to say, fuck it.
So much of this can apply to anybody's life. I work in mental health, and I've recently come to appreciate the role that mental illness played in my addiction in the first place. At this time, with the DSM-5, substance use disorder is considered a co-occurring disease, which I think means unless you have like a primary one like bipolar or whatever, you wouldn't have substance use disorder. I think that might change in the future. But I have been depressed or diagnosed with like major depressive disorder, seasonal affective disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder, if I remember correctly. Those are even things to recover from. Everybody in life goes through trials, and one of the first things I think we talked about, I hit on the importance of just being able to relate to other addicts. I think community in life is important. Surrounding yourself by positive people, even when you're not an addict. Like there's inspiration and wisdom to be taken from the idea of recovery, a world of recovery for really anybody. Obviously, you know, we have a target audience, but any set of open ears, open-minded people, they can draw from these things. And I think it's very applicable what we talk about.
And that's the key. You have to surround yourself with people that have the same goals and mentality as you. Like I for one would never hang out with a drug addict, right? Okay.
What about a recovering drug addict?
Well, obviously. Right.
Okay.
No, and I think there's that gray area, and we discussed this once before, is at what point in your life, right? Let's say right now, someone actively in addiction comes to you, knocks on the door right now, and says, "Hey Tim, I know we don't know each other that well, but I've seen you around, blah blah blah. I know you're in recovery. I'd like to get there too. Do you have a few minutes for me?" At what point do you feel that is a high risk situation for you?
What's tricky about that is in my job that happens, and it happens frequently, just in that every few weeks, you know what I mean? And that's not something I think that happens in the average person's life every few weeks. So every so often I have that scenario unfold, and my job is a safe place, right? But I'm aware of how much time I give to somebody. My goal is not to be that person's savior, but to hopefully point them in the right direction so they can take the next step on their journey, ideally, of recovery. I would not hang out with an addict right now. I am happy that I mentioned having lived with my parents in Swartz Creek. I don't now, but I'm happy I'm not, say, hypothetical situation, my parents are getting older, say one of them needed pain medication. I'm glad I'm not under a roof where I know it's there. Just always at any given moment, all I have to do is walk into this room, open a bottle, and I can take a couple. So there's still as much success as I'm having and as much as I'm growing. I'm increasingly aware of the boundaries that are necessary for me to continue moving in that direction. So on the one hand, helping people helps me. I love to do it. So on the one hand, it's a good thing for me, but I'm only going to go so deep with somebody right now. And I'm definitely not walking out of this building with another addict. You know, we're going in our own directions. I can't.
But it is a fine line. I mean, you can agree that kind of, for a lot of people, I mean, you're a little further down the road in your recovery, but someone who's in that first 3 to 4 months, that would be something very, very, very tricky to maneuver, because misery likes company. The chances of them being talked into something stupid would be extremely high. Misery likes company is another big one that I like to use. If I'm doing something that's bad and you show any sort of interest in it, I'm going to just try to convince you that it's not that bad, just so I'm not the only one doing it, right? Yeah. And then it becomes a team effort rather than a solo effort, which then at the end of the day,
Yeah.
you know what that means.
It's like kind of in the same vein of hurt people,
Mhm.
right? People who are struggling have a propensity to drag other people down, and it's not to destroy that individual as much as it is to commiserate and to not be alone. So
Right.
yeah, misery, I get it. Misery loves
Yes.
company is a very real phenomenon in this world.
And it's actually the polar opposite of surround yourself with positive people.
Which is what I try to do now, right?
Right.
Like I look at someone like you, I look at someone like my brother, and I see things I want. So I put myself around the people who hopefully can rub off on me a little bit, who can
Right.
guide me. So like, even if I don't have a legit official sponsor in recovery, I do have people who have a lot of clean time, who have years, decades of that under their belt, who are now investing in me, who I've developed a relationship with and are so giving. And that's what I need in my life. I need the opportunity to help addicts, but kind of from a distance, right?
Yes.
Like we're not getting close. We just can't. If
Right.
you follow me on this path, then maybe down the line.
Yeah.
But
And
right now we can't.
they have to be at I don't want to say your level, but at your progression point.
And you can
Or
see
above,
it, right?
or
I
above.
hope you can see it in me. Like
I see
I
it.
feel like I can see it when the newcomers come. I feel like you get a sense of, and anybody can relapse at any time, but I feel like you have a sense of who wants it, and you must from being in the jail.
Oh, I see it. I
You
see
must.
it. I can actually read right through it, and it's a positive tool in one way, but it's sad to see that you can sit there and look at somebody and know that they, you
It's
know,
all
whether
bullshit.
yeah, and I'm very direct, and those of you that know me know that I'll just blurt it right out, factual as it may be. Look, you're not ready. Stop bullshitting me and yourself, because you're not bullshitting me. And at the end of the day, when they're lying to themselves. I mean, they think they're getting one over on me,
First and foremost.
yeah, they're lying to themselves. So at that point, you know, like you said, they're not ready, and you have to respect that. And
You surely, though, when you see someone who you think to yourself, like, I think he's going to make it, that you must at that point want to spend more time with that person, right? Like you want to invest in the people who you feel.
well,
have a
here's the
chance,
tricky
don't
part.
you?
Yeah, well, here's the tricky part with law enforcement, and I think this is kind of easing up a little bit. But due to the fact that I'm involved with Families Against Narcotics, I see a lot of people that I deal with, you know, on the law enforcement side of it. So it's great to go in and see someone show up to a meeting, actually pay attention, that's on their phone, like, you know, blah, this is bullshit, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And we talked about our last meeting, how involved even the court-ordered people are.
Yeah.
And it's quite amazing to see that the turnaround on that mentality is changing. It's not like, oh, I gotta go sit here and listen to this.
And I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't been court ordered to attend those fan meetings that you were a part of.
Right. And you really wouldn't be a speaker unless you were fan ordered to get up in front impromptu to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We kind of threw you under the bus on that one, but you know what? That's the best way to see what's, you know, if someone's ready. And
yeah, it was cool.
You were ready. But with that, we're gonna wrap it up here. We've been going for quite a long time, a little longer. We
about an hour, right?
Yeah.
It's a good start.
Yeah. So the reason we were kind of doing this intro was to kind of let everybody know that our podcast will be launching pretty soon.
Law and Disorder.
Yeah, pretty clever. I like that. Actually, Tim came up with it.
Very proud of that.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie.
But yeah, so we're going to be launching that pretty soon. We got some editing to do. We got a couple of 3-4 hours of it already rolling. So look for that. And obviously, once it's out there, we'll release it on our Facebook
It'd be
page.
like on iTunes and
Yes. Yeah, we're going to go.
YouTube.
We're going to get it out there because it's something that we both feel needs to be out there. It'll also help the law enforcement end of it as well as.
It's going to help me a lot. And anybody who gets involved in any way, asking a question, saying, hey, I saw that, is going to help me a lot. So just me personally, I appreciate everybody who's viewing or just sharing anything that you're doing to facilitate this. I want to say thank you because it means a lot to me.
Right. So like us, share us, recommend us, and if anyone has any questions or whatsoever, message the page. Either Tim or I will get back with you if you need help, resources, or just want to chit chat. That's what we're here for.
That's what we're here for.
All right, so thank you all for watching, and
Go Lions.
well, yeah, okay, maybe next week, or what is it? Maybe next year.
Yeah,
For the
next
past
year.
40 years. Anyway, we're out.
Yep. Recovery's possible.